Osiris.
Count to 3. Come with me, and you'll be in a world of
Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do.
You have found Daniel Donato's Lost Highway.
That lost highway.
Well, howdy, friends. Welcome to episode 64 of the Lost Highway podcast. My name is Daniel Donato. This is the podcast of all things Cosmic Country. This podcast is brought to you by Osiris Media because this road needs a place to go, and our friends over at Topo Chico for keeping us hydrated, both off stage and on stage. Because life is a stage in some ways, metaphorically speaking. I want to share with y'all this quote by Seneca. Seneca's an old Stoic philosopher, right? A lot of people name their dogs after Seneca. If you don't know any dogs named after Seneca, that's just fine. You just got to meet more dogs. And I don't know any cats named Seneca, but here is one that is just absolutely brilliant. And this comes from his a short collection of ideas called On the Shortness of Life. So here it is. This one's wonderful. Life is long if you know how to use it. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. Life is long enough, and a sufficiently generous amount has been given to us for the highest achievements, if it were all well invested. But when it is wasted in heedless luxury and spent on no good activity, we are forced at last, by death's final constraint, to realize that it has passed away before we knew it was passing. So it is. We are not given a short life, but we make it short, and we are not ill-supplied, but we are wasteful of it. Life is long if you know how to use it. Now, why am I talking about this quote here today? Is I see in myself, I spend perhaps too much time in certain days thinking about concepts that are not like immediately applicable to my immediate environment. This could be negative news that I'm taking in. This could be negative media that I'm taking in by seeing it on social media. And I guess it's the concept really of just like really seeing that you have a cosmic sovereign responsibility to focus your consciousness and your thoughts and subconscious and unconscious as much as your free will can conjure onto the thing that will triple down and make you the most happy and fulfilled in your life. And there's a lot of distractions now that are putting us away from that. It's like what Terence McKenna talks about, where culture is not the answer and culture is not your friend, but culture is also a necessary machine to propagate and compound the success that you want to see fit for your life. So it's just a matter of like being aware that culture is not necessarily like this very friendly machine that like wants you to be you. It's actually kind of a different thing. It's more or less a rapport that if you don't abide by, you kind of get excluded out of. And you spend so much time thinking about it and being involved in it through social media that it can really kind of be a detriment to your sovereign, cosmic, individualized nature that you, or at least for myself, I'm trying to fulfill and realize on a daily basis to the highest degree that I can. Not every day is the same. Don't judge yourself. Some days you have days that are just not 100%. Some days you kill it, some days you don't. Some days you blast off, some days you just smoke, said Sergil Simpson. Yes, Sergil Simpson said it best. So here we go. One more time. It is life is long if you know how to use it. We are not given a short life, but we make it short. And we are not ill-supplied, but we are wasteful of it. So just keep that in mind. You know, Seneca, AD, 40 AD, something like that, was already thinking about these things. Roll with it. I think it's a good one. Just remember, life is long if you know how to use it. My next guest today is Mr. Robert Edward Grant, by far one of the most gifted, realized minds I've ever had the opportunity to speak with. He's founded and co-founded several companies that are in the cybernetics space, blockchain space, security space, healthcare space, and fintech as well. But his attention and his acumen within the past decade or so has been dedicated to uncovering the sacred geometry secrets of this universe and this world of sciences and arts through numbers. It's such a brilliant journey that he's embarked upon, and the findings that he shares and creates through this journey are just immensely timeless and inspiring. And it was a sincere privilege to be able to sit down and speak with him. Quite surely and literally, the one and only Mr. Robert Edward Grant.
I wish we could arrive at a more humanized tone of these notifications, because they're just a little bit too George Orwell.
Yeah.
The
Totally.
Just sincerely, how much are we gonna really, foreshadow at the utopian?
Well, it's funny because today I just posted on social media this. We did a data bill of rights for our blockchain.
Yes.
Sterling. And today I just posted on freedom of speech as the First Amendment, and how I believe, very strongly in freedom of speech. I might argue with your position on things, but I will fight to the death for your right to voice those positions.
Of course. I
mean, it's just, there's no way you can have like a democracy or any kind of successful anything, even autocracies for that matter, without freedom of speech. And I think that's just such a messed up thing. And what was mind blowing to me was when I posted that today, one of my musician friends, Major, who's like a music producer, he's also a singer-songwriter himself, he sent me a thing back saying, hey, you never even mentioned the word COVID, and they put a COVID label on your freedom of speech post.
I really hate that. It scares me.
Well, it's bizarro, right? I mean, the reason why they do it, apparently, I only found this out today, is because once they tag it with that, then the government can tag, reduces all your search engine results.
Of course.
And then secondly, the government can take it down.
Of course.
Under Emergency Authorities Act. I mean, it's like crazy stuff. And here I am talking about freedom of speech. It has nothing to do with COVID.
Right, but again, right, so the thing that's so fascinating is the suppression of freedom of speech, how that seems to be something that everyone is subconsciously agreeing with because they're not calling it a suppression of freedom of speech. They're targeting specific parties or specific ideas, ideologies, philosophies, whatever. And they're saying that is against the agenda. People don't even know there's an agenda in the mass. They just perceive that there is right or wrong. It seems to be this kind of conundrum where you view things from, if you view things as a right or wrong parameter dichotomy, you lose IQ points all of a sudden. It's like it makes you less smart. And why would we do such a thing to ourselves? But that truly it's a very terrifying thing. I'm glad that you agree with that. It seems if you look thematically through the ages, when suppression of freedom of speech starts to come about, terror lurks around the other corner.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, it always starts with that, right? It always starts with a suppression of freedom of speech. And it's usually always done in the context of for the public good, right? Which is straight out of V for Vendetta.
Right. Yes, indeed.
It's like all the weird shit in the world that ever happens, like, yeah, for the public good. We're going to start the Holocaust for the public good. That's the way it's always sold to people.
Right.
And it's always done under the auspices of social democracy.
Right.
So somehow it triggers that. But then what ends up happening is those things that were self-purported social democracies look a lot like fascism.
A whole lot like fascism, and they tend to take one party that has a different ideology than the agenda and to absolutely villainize them to the point of where our tribalistic tendencies, which we don't want to admit that we actually have and possess and are archetypally possessed by, they start to manifest in our behaviors on an individual level and also group level.
And then the only way they identify themselves is by calling them anti whatever it is that they're against.
Right. You might even know why you're for something and you're against people who are against you.
I actually see it as communism is just a mask of fascism. Because think about that for just a moment. Name me one government that claims to be a communist regime that is not actually a totalitarian fascist regime.
Once the predator has the neck, they're not going to not go for the jugular. Right.
Exactly. I mean, think about this. Is North Korea, I mean, they call themselves, democracy, social democracies or communistic regimes, but actually it's a totalitarian regime. And the way you can always tell if it's totalitarian is there's pictures, effigies of the great leader everywhere. Right. So you're catching me at a funny moment as I'm sort of contemplating the dystopian nature of kind of the weird technocratic control that we're under right now. It's very bizarre.
Well, it's extremely bizarre. The thing that I find that's most unsettling for me is when I observe my two younger sisters and how the manipulation of specifically social media behaviors is starting to manifest in their behaviors of their own analog realities. And it's absolutely terrifying, whether it's with their political identification on certain ideologies, which they don't understand at all. I'm 26. I'm not a very over the top intelligent person, and I have to be very aware of what and very sovereign in terms of what I take in and how I react to things and how I feel. Younger kids are not doing that. And the way that this, as nature compounds on itself, the way this younger generation is start moving forward in the future seems a little bit terrifying. And how to not remain pessimistic about that is a little hard. It's a little challenging. It's absolutely crazy. I assume you talk to a lot of younger people, right? Given the tenure that you have in your business dealings and what you're doing now, which of course is business as well, but not directly related to pharmaceuticals and other industries that you've worked with.
No. I have very varied interests, I guess, across, different sectors.
Of course.
I'm in healthcare, but also in fintech, in security, as well as in free energy and clean energy approaches to new technologies, et cetera. So, I've got different tech kind of biases, I guess, as well as different industrial biases, but everybody has biases. That's why it's so important to be able to have empathy and be able to listen to countervailing perspectives.
There it is.
I can't even imagine. Today at 52 years old, I cannot imagine not having had the benefit of being able to change my mind on certain things because I was convinced as I got older and by my friends and colleagues of different positions on things. And that's one of the great, wonderful aspects of life, that we have the opportunity to learn and change our viewpoints and perspectives. But this world that we're clearly being prod into like a cattle prod.
Right.
Is one where we're not really allowed to change those perspectives, or those perspectives have become conditioned biases that we aren't even aware were biases in the first place.
Right. Absolutely. And the thing that's also very fascinating, which I'm starting to think of it in almost a Freudian way, which is there is a persona now that is owned by companies that have $1 trillion+ net worths, that is more valuable on a social and tribalistic speculation than your analog identity. Who you are on Facebook or on TikTok or whatever, in short, is almost more valuable to the social collective consciousness than who you are as a person.
Well, yeah, because your value is derived in a way by these platforms as, and I love the way you use the term analog, right? That's kind of interesting. Versus digital. But your value is in large part your behaviors and what you will likely do. And so what you have done is less valuable than what you will do. And so therefore, if you can take this information that can be digitized, take your analog person to make it a practical, pragmatic, and predictive sort of analytical exercise that could be digitized,
right?
That is more valuable than who you are to this world.
Right.
Because they can predict what you will do. They know what your actions will be next. If they know your actions and what they will be next, they can look at it collectively and then monetize that value.
Right.
As well. So that's why data has become now the world's most valuable asset.
Right.
And so your data is super valuable. You don't even know it. We're all living and working on a digital plantation that we didn't even know existed. We just called it the earth.
Right. And when Facebook,
so it's basically mining the produce, just like, having slaves in the 19th century or 18th century, people that lived on plantations, they in some way, shape, or form, they lived on the plantation. They lived there with their family. And by the way, it wasn't only race-based. There was a lot of stuff that was oriented around, indentured servitude. If I wanted to travel from Ireland to the United States, I'd have to put in some time working at whoever paid for my fare to get over, right? And I was treated like a slave. It was kind of messed up, and all of slavery was messed up. But now we're all just in a different kind of slavery by a different name. And that different slavery today is just we're all being mined of our digital value from our analog experiences.
the kind of slavery that it's creating is certainly going to be generational. There's this, there's a real chemical change that is happening, in especially younger women. Like there's a literal change in the tendency and these almost these autonomous nervous system reflexes of where's my phone, where's my external brain, and getting into biotech. When does that start becoming truly invasive and talking, speculating on metaverse endeavors and how that compounds and scales? It's absolutely terrifying, but people they don't want to be without their phone. They feel stressed. They feel like they're dead when their phone's dead. Oy vey, because somebody's controlling all of the impulses that are showing up on your screen, right? And they're your best favor and your happiest state of mind, most positive way to, even vibrate on a mathematical level is not what these large corporations want. And I'm all for capitalism. I'm all for the free market, but there certainly seems to be a regulation that needs to happen. But I wonder, you have so much cyclical tenure in life and just seeing things happen from
cyclical tenure. That's a really nice way of saying that I'm getting older.
Well, in the West, we talk, West,
I'm not 52. I just have secular tenure.
I like it. It's good, right? It's true because, the asset of wisdom that's truly the thing. I can't wait to attain such.
I guess that could be secular or secular. It could work both ways.
Yes.
Because everything does go in cycles and it is all about secularism, right? To a certain extent. And there is some truth to that. I have to say. There is absolutely some very strong truth. One of the things that I've laughed about for a long time is that Wall Street trends, trends on Wall Street, unless you've lived long enough, you don't know when, you have never experienced necessarily the full cycles of Wall Street. Right. So for example, the people, when we had the big, crash in 2008, I remember talking with my friends about it and saying, well, geez, how did this happen? Because everyone had to know that there was a bubble. Well, if you look at the tenure of time of people that work on Wall Street, investment bankers, when my partner was an investment banker, and I once said to him when he was, turning 50 years old, I said, really, you're going to be the oldest investment banker in the world? Because investment bankers are super young. They're super young. And so they've never seen, generally, most people are totally burned out of investment banking at at most levels of sort of the hierarchy of investment banks. They're mostly burned out by the time they're 40. So therefore, the people that are in the field have never lived through cycles. And the cycles are longer than the time it took for them to get into investment banking after MBA school until the time that they're out.
Precisely.
So they don't know how to predict when things all of a sudden start to get awry.
Right.
They just don't know what could happen next. And this is why I think people that were wise sages throughout history, like Plato, who wrote the book, the treatise, The Republic, describing how all governments go through cyclic change. This is actually a great thing to read because it allows us to create some prediction based on history and historical reference. And it's not just history, it's her story, it's our story as well. But the fact is that we all benefit when we can step back and see a bigger picture. That's why I'm neither Republican nor Democrat.
Of course. Well, of course.
I've seen the cycle, right? I see the cycle. It will always, topics will always polarize the population. It'll always, is it just coincidence that 50% of the population is one direction and 50% is the other? Is it coincidence that, we have a perfect, number of male and female almost perfectly matches on the planet?
Right.
Or is it really just related to a polarity and a larger, sort of connection that we don't necessarily perceive on the surface of our world?
And thereupon, that kind of specifically coded, that kind of inquisition was, thanks to SEO, how I arrived at you. How is it that there exists a yin and yang almost in all ways? And how is it that it's even, I imagine if we were to analyze the vibrational frequencies of the people, I bet there's even a difference there when we start talking about political issues. I bet somebody who truly is all the way a Republican or someone who is truly all the way is a Democrat, I bet there's a yin and yang mathematical distillation that we'll even arrive at. And I think it's so funny. Like, it's almost like this thing about discovering the quantitative explanation for all these parts of human nature, which is probably, a subsidiary of nature itself. It's almost, there's a mathematical consistency that's there, yet our egos are the thing that is making us take it so seriously and so personally. But really, it's just like a matter of fact cycle of this planet.
Oh, absolutely. I think everything will be polarized. I am a student of Hermeticism.
Okay.
And
I'm not familiar.
So in Hermeticism, it's something, now that I've said it to you, you'll probably start seeing it all over the place.
That's how it goes.
That is how it goes. So it explains the concept of polarity and how all truths are but half truths.
Right.
So let's assume now that, we all kind of grew up in this world of what we believed was an objective reality. I see something a certain way, you see something a different way, but let's say we both witnessed the same crime.
Right.
And then we go in, I just met with a jury, one of the world's jury experts, right? Actually the film Runaway Jury was made after him. If you ever saw the one by John Grisham back in the 90s. And he was the guy that they modeled the whole film after. And I only learned this today about this person. I've known the guy for 20 years. But
that's a humble man. Wow.
He's one of the world's experts in juries. Okay, so I just met with them, and we're working together on a new technology platform that uses predictive analytics to predict which way juries will go.
Court
Trials. Very interesting, because this technology could easily be expanded to include anything.
Right.
And I started thinking, wow, this is like precog.
Right.
It's like precog, right? You can predict anything off of this. And so you put in the right inputs, it's like what's called in business a Monte Carlo analysis.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that term.
It's a multivariate aspect analysis that you use to basically create this very complex sort of output, or a lot of complex inputs rather, to create a very simplistic output of yes or no, right? Sure. And so it's kind of like, in order to understand the simplicity of yes or no, whatever issue is going to go, two competitors going against each other, two boxers in a ring, two companies, right? Or a plaintiff versus a defendant, who's going to win, right? This is the type of analysis that can be done. And in order to be able to come up with a simplistic answer, you have to be able to have a huge amount of knowledge of the complexity of the surrounding variables, right? So how do you pour all those variables in and then get a simplistic answer? So we're just talking about this just now, okay? So why is it that we have this world that the way it's been described, even in Hermeticism, as all truths are but half truths? And the best way I can describe it is this. I have this canister from Balvenie, which is one of the whiskeys that I have kind of
a whiskey man.
Yes, I like whiskey. So I don't drink very much, but when I do, it's Balvenie. I'm kidding. There's no product placement on this.
That's okay.
But basically, if I show you this, and I said, okay, and all you could see was this flat side right here, and you see nothing else, right? Just like as on the screen. I'd say, what am I holding? And you could see that it's casting a shadow behind me, right? Assume that that's a darker wall on the back wall there. There's no light behind it, and it's casting a shadow. You might say, oh, you're holding a circle. Right. But if someone were sitting in the chair over on the side over here and looked at the shadow it's casting on the wall over here, they would say, no, you're holding a rectangle.
Wow. Right.
But they could fight all day long over, no, it's a circle. No, it's a rectangle. No, it's a circle. No, it's a rectangle. I would then laugh at some point, because I would say, well, I have the benefit of the higher dimensional perspective that is both are correct.
But so the omniscience, right? Okay.
Because it's actually a cylinder, and from one angle it is a rectangle, and the other angle in 2 dimension it is a circle.
So conceptually, then, when you look at it in this way, when you arrive at a quantitative period, your intuition therefore should be attenuated to say, no, there's not just one, but there are actually probably several explanations.
We never assume a higher dimension. And this is why, so therefore, we never also assume our own conditioning bias as playing a role in that.
Right.
So, for example, if two people saw the same crime, you could have two entirely different stories on what happened in that crime.
Right.
When it's time to testify.
Right.
So rather than looking at truth as being absolute, without bias, what we have to start to come to the realization of is that, well, wait a minute, maybe the truth I'm seeing is just one facet of a more complex prism of the whole truth.
Right.
And that, in order to analyze and fully comprehend the whole truth, I need to be able to look at the problem from all the different facets or angles of perspective on it.
In watching your documentary, I realized that there were several values in which that I deeply felt resonance with, and I feel like that's the only reason why we, tribalistically form a circle, why we would ever invest in any endeavors, because there is a perceived value that is not yet attained or is presently being attained that the other party finds value and meaning in.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It resonates. And one thing that you had said was to see things as they are, as they really are. And oh my gosh, just like anything in life, when it's such a simple command, there's an exponentially yet beautiful unveiling story of complexity and trials and errors that are going to formulate a path with that philosophy. So to see things as they are, the prism of truth, as you said, absolutely wild. People now today receive conviction in the public jury of a happening before it's even in a civil jury, before it's even confirmed. And yet their conviction is already satiated and they already know how they feel before the trial of something even happens. And the feedback chamber, the echo chamber starts to, of course, compound on itself, and it gets even more scary. Wow. This is you're actually revealing facts that make this much more scary than it was prior to this.
Because then your truth is subject to the interpretation of the truth by each and every one of us, whatever that truth is, right? So, and the problem with bias is that we only see, someone asked me yesterday, because they asked me about why mathematically someone had not seen before what I saw in a mathematical thing related to encryption and cryptography. And my answer was, honestly, because we only see what we want to see.
And you say, so do you say that knowing that I
also do that.
You do. So you do.
I see it. So that's the thing. Awakening doesn't mean like this concept of woke and I'm going to blame everybody else for life.
Right.
What awakening actually means is that I realized all of a sudden one day, somehow, some way, that I'm not just an actor on some stage, but I'm actually a playwright and a director and the producer as well.
Right.
And the way that I see the world has such a huge impact on the experience I have within that world.
Right. It creates the world, actually. Creates a lot.
Yeah, because 95% of what happens to us isn't actually what happens to us. It's what we perceived happened to us. Right. So the big shift is when we realize, wait a minute, we're the architect, we're the whole thing. So there's no one else to blame in this but me. And so therefore, why did I bring this into my existence?
Right.
What was the reason I needed to experience this difficulty or challenge or whatever? The world doesn't actually happen to us. It happens for us, even the difficult things. And that's one of the hard things to overcome, to understand. And there we need sometimes the perspective of time to show that, how many times have you had this experience where something that was terrible that happened, that later on you decided, you know what, that actually turned out to be a pretty good thing that happened. I just didn't realize the benefit of it at that moment in time.
Right. Absolutely. Every time, a resume really is a collection of hardship that has been conquered.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. So it's like, I would never want to take away those perspectives from myself, because those were huge realizations. And when you have enough, as you say, whether it's cyclical or secular time and experience, you start to realize that those things, a lot of it just gets healed with time. A lot of it, because your perspective shifts with time. You see things differently. You experience, why does time go by so, quickly as you get older? Because your experience with it is directly proportional to how you experience it now on a day-to-day basis. So for example, when you're 1 year old, 1 year seems like a freaking lifetime because that was your lifetime so far.
Right.
When you're 10 years old, 1 year is 1/10 of a lifetime. When you're 20, it's only 1/20th. When you're 50, it's 1/50th. The years start flying by because your experience with time has now expanded. It's not that the time is any different necessarily.
Right.
It's just simply that your experience with it is a lot broader. And therefore you can conceptualize it. You can contextualize it.
Right. Conceptualize and contextualize. Right.
Exactly.
Almost what we're doing simultaneously, these kind of our minds, we're conceptualizing things and contextualizing them simultaneously, which is absolutely a fascinating conundrum to arrive at.
This is why we need duality.
Oh, right. Right. Well,
Let's think about duality for a moment, because it's tied to exactly what you just said.
Please.
In order for me to fully understand pleasure, I need to understand the degrees of pain. Would I even know how to describe the gradations of light as it is separated through a prism if I didn't fully understand what darkness is and what incandescent light was? Probably not.
Right.
So these subtleties that we experience, the different things that we experience on a day-to-day basis, whether it's love or fear or all the things that become dichotomies in our lifetimes, actually bring more texture and more meaning to those emotions that we have that are the positive ones, because the negative ones exist.
Right.
And maybe just maybe, without those negative emotions, would we even appreciate the positive ones as much?
Right. Plenty of studies show no. There's no direct correlation between industrialization and happiness levels among a general populace. So that would say no. Right.
Exactly.
Right. And that's right.
So I become very grateful for my negative and difficult experiences.
But that kind of, there's this interesting concept I've been dealing with lately and thinking with and interacting with life with, which is to not take things personally, whether it's success or whether it's a failure, whether it's in regardless of the scale of such a thing. Now you can take responsibility for the things, of course, that you and assets you attain, of course, and things you realize. But to not take them very, very personally, I think is a very wise way, because then you lean more in towards the role of being the observer and not the person who's the actor in the film, which seems to be kind of what you're talking about. So the duality, wow, what a beautiful way. And which is another kind of flag that is similar to the yin and yang, a distillation of almost all things. Even Carl Jung talking about the shadow of a human. We in ourselves are a walking conundrum of duality at all points in time.
Absolutely. So, one of the big ahas for me was about 11 years ago. I went to Hong Kong to meet this guy who had left the company. I was CEO of Bausch & Lomb at the time, of Bausch & Lomb Surgical. And this guy had left the company. He was a country manager in Thailand. And he left to go on like a five-year to a Buddhist monastery to do like a vipassana that lasted that long. So not talking to anybody for 5 years. Okay, that's a long time. Boy. So I thought, well, wow, I'll be one of the first people to talk to. I got to find out what this guy learned while he was there, because that's fascinating stuff. And so I talked with him in Hong Kong, and I said, "What did you learn while you were there for 5 years?" And I only wanted the Reader's Digest version, and he gave me even less of the Reader's Digest version. He gave me a simple answer, which was completely not simple at the same time.
Right.
There is no duality. Duality is an illusion.
Whoa, I don't really, God, part of me hates that.
Right. And that's how I felt too. I was like, wait, what? What are you talking about? He's like, good, evil, like love, hate, or fear, humility, and arrogance.
Sure.
These are all just different degrees of the same thing. And actually, we think of them as being on a linear line, but truthfully, they're actually on a circle or a sphere. And I was like, So I was flying home contemplating his very wise words because I felt like something about it resonated for me. So
Of course.
I started writing down all the antonym relationships of words I could think of.
Right.
So like humility and arrogance. Okay, I'm like, how can those two things be the same thing? Degrees of the same thing. And then I realized, I'm like, well, wait a minute. If it's linear, then if I keep going, is there a place that I could go and become even more humble? Right? And is it possible that I become so humble that I actually become arrogant in that humility? Do I know people like that? I actually do.
Oh, I see. I see.
So you actually see this like a circle. So then I started thinking, well, what about like communist versus fascism? I was like, so if you go super far left, you're a communist.
Right.
But man, oh man, you go too far, you're a fascist. It doesn't keep going out farther away from each other. They wrap around on each other.
Right.
And every concept I noticed of duality was exactly like that. If you fall in love with someone and it doesn't work out, is it common for you to hate that person? Yeah, it is.
Right.
Right. So you've got conditional and unconditional love. Betrayal. So what is it you have to experience? What types of experiences will you bring into this world of your directed playwright activity? If I'm here to learn unconditional love, then probably I need to experience its opposite. And I'll keep experiencing it over and over again until I finally learn it. And its opposite is betrayal, because that is the definition of conditional love.
This is the snake eating its tail. This is the art.
This is the Ouroboros. Exactly.
All right. This is almost the price that anything that exists within this specific realm of human space and time to be, it also has to not be that thing, such as being born and dying.
And this is why Shakespeare wrote "To Be or Not to Be."
Right.
Hamlet's soliloquy.
Ooh. Wow. You know, the thing that's, I wonder about Shakespeare, which is something when you're younger, you think you have all this acumen to kind of neglect the classics, whether the classics are of a poetic playwright, whether of a musical play, whether, something that's perhaps by Bach. Music archetypally just hit me in my lizard-based brain and my spine, where I was consumed by it on a mathematical level too, which is what I want to talk on here in a second. But I have this theory about these truths, and I'd like to hear your thought on them, which is I wonder about the thing about something that's true and the thing that's a lie, right? And I don't know what makes art truthful or not. And this is something I really have a question for someone who has cyclical tenure, which is why I think the thing that could only postulate itself over many decades of time, many generations, and hypotheses of the right way to interact with life. There's the only way something can really live through all that time, such as the Pythagoras, such as Seneca, such as Plato. It's the amount of truth that must be encapsulated within any concept. I wonder if truth is very much so the thing that allows to give something perhaps this almost time-space armor that actually can live through different generations and still be. There's a reason why we listen to Bach, and there's a reason why we stay to be or not to be when we don't even really know who Shakespeare was. We don't even know if he wasn't even a very wealthy born prince at the time who was going by a different name.
Yeah, no, I mean, Shakespeare was, I think it's one of my partners that I work very closely with, Alan Green, is probably the world's preeminent expert on decoding the Shakespeare code.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
And, he was probably a collection of people, including the 17th Earl of Oxford, who was also the lover of Queen Elizabeth, Edward de Vere. He was probably also Sir Francis Bacon, and possibly even Kit Marlowe, and for sure John Dee. All four of them were Rosicrucians who basically worked together, all Hermeticists, who encrypted not only the works of Shakespeare in the sonnets, 154 sonnets, and also the plays of Shakespeare, but in addition, the King James Bible as well. It was published in the same time period. So they encrypted all of these things with hidden Hermetic wisdom and knowledge. So, but your comment about this notion of compression of truth.
Compression of truth, right.
Because I see this as kind of like a compression of truth. When there is a statement that literally could apply to all the facets of the whole truth, it tends to endure.
Right. Right. Yes.
So this goes back to Seneca. This goes back to Plato and Pythagoras and Socrates. And I'm not a big fan of Aristotle, but I definitely believe that all of these polymaths, and Aristotle, I don't even conclude as a polymath. He was not a Greek mathematician, and he was a very narrow-minded thinker that became the basis, who set the stage for pretty much all of Western philosophy of what we now refer to as sort of reductionism.
Mm-hmm.
He was a botanist who named plants, right? Named plants and animals, and he wanted to put everything in categories, whereas mathematics meant all learning. So the term mathematics in Greek up until Aristotle's time referred to the seat or the reference of all learning, not just the quantity or the science of quantity. And what Aristotle did is, as a botanist who was setting philo classes, he wanted to do the same thing with the disciplines of learning. Mm-hmm. And so he wasn't very good at geometry. He wasn't very good at mathematics. So he said, no, this is just the limited science of quantity, rather than referencing it as Pythagoras did and Plato did, as all is number. The entire universe is number. That is the language that the universe is writ upon. And our DNA is all number as well. And so he very much limited. That's why the terms polymathy was not a reference to mathematics. It was a reference to all learning, poly-learning, right? And Philomath, which is the name of my book, Philomathy, is also just meaning lover of learning, right? Lover of learning. So it was Aristotle who made that limited separation. Right?
Now, this is a product plug. This is now product placement.
This is a product plug, yes. But if you want to learn more about that, then find that book, Philomath. But basically, this notion that you just raised of being able to compress truth is because that truth has turned the prism of all of its different facets of truth into a sphere, a very smooth sphere.
Oh.
Right? So, for example, love.
Sure. Right.
Love is a very, very broad thing, right? Very broad. Acceptance, gratitude. These things are universal truths that will stand the test of time.
Always
Stand the test of time. And that's why, you have people like Jesus, Muhammad, or, Siddhartha, all of them, these purveyors of this kind of very broad wisdom. Don't get stuck on the illusion. Don't get stuck on the game of polarity. Don't get stuck on the interpretation or of the observance of it, but rather be able to observe without judgment.
Right. Yes.
They all taught non-judgment. Every one of them taught non-judgment.
Yes.
And acceptance.
Right.
So those are the lasting truths, I believe.
People seem to be really tied, though, to these kind of tribalistic identification systems that we, especially here in America, where they don't want to recognize those similarities between, say, someone like Siddhartha and Jesus. Oh, no, I was raised this way. My parents are this way. I'm not even going to look at that over there. But what you'll see is a collection of asset values that are literally the same. Yeah. Right. Okay.
But you're absolutely right. I went to meet with, after I discovered the prime number pattern, in 2018, I got an invitation to meet with Dalai Lama in his house. So I went to India. I brought a scientific group with me, and I spent the day teaching Dalai Lama the prime number pattern. And while we were there, he mentioned that he had all the records at his house in Tibet, which he's exiled from, of Jesus and his visit to Tibet.
He's exiled from his house in Tibet.
Yeah, he lives in North India now because he got thrown out by the Chinese. Well, not thrown out, he escaped, right? There's a great movie about that as well that's worth watching, about Dalai Lama's life and how he was basically exiled out of his country because communism and Mao Zedong in particular didn't want him as a symbol of control for the people or leadership of any sort, right? I mean, this was a similar type thing. There was a cultural war. There was a cancellation war going on at that time.
Right.
Chiang Kai-shek was thrown out of the country, and you have the Chinese people who were so tempted by the notions of capitalism that they decided to put themselves into this vice lock grip called communism. That's what we do. We judge everyone else with the things we don't like about ourselves.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. This is a new one for me that I, of course, as a stumbling stoned ape, had arrived into that one day. And boy, is it relieving to kind of see all the downfalls that you bring upon your own, spectrum of consciousness. It's a great relief to know that it's you, that it's not the world. And the way that you're judging other people is a direct reflection of how you're judging yourself, right?
Yeah, and we will attract everything we judge until we no longer judge everything we attract.
And when we say attract, I definitely skew in a lot of ways, despite my personality test results, as, I love rationality. I really do. Even though I'm very high in openness and I'm very high in industriousness and I'm very high in extrovertedness. That could definitely, lead me to kind of love things and romanticize things. But I do love a rationale. And when we say we attract things, the thing that's so fascinating is that there's all these quantitative mathematical proofs of the fact that all is number. One thing I've been observing lately is kind of, and my mind just goes to dichotomy, because music is dichotomy. There's major and minor. There's two kinds of songs. That's freaky. I mean, that is absolutely freaky. That's weird. So there's almost a framework, right? And let's call that order. And within all of these numerous frameworks, whether it's the framework of a rectangle that holds the Mona Lisa or an NFT, whether it's the framework of a song that is major, or whether it's the framework of a human, there is all this individualized chaos that is episodic and almost mortal in its nature, but almost astonishingly beautiful at all times. It's all different, yet it's all the same. Humans kind of have this way we want to make things linear, when nature almost seems to be inherently nonlinear. When I go on a nature and I go in hiking, say in Zion, like I did this past weekend, into Angel's Landing, and I get up to the top of this mountain and you observe all the curves and where all the rivers used to be. It's astounding. It's breathtaking. It's divine, truly. It's non-linear though. It's not like a Roblox game where we have this low poly rendering of we'll say to a human to another human on the screen that a human made. Here's what a mountain looks like that is not made by a human, but it has to be linear in order for us to kind of make it. We can't make a non-linear representation of what nature really is. But what you have showed me is that there perhaps is a mathematical linear pattern to all of these things. And so I'm almost existentially more scared than I ever have been, and I'm only 26. This is a real issue.
So you know how flight simulators work, right?
To a degree.
The way flight simulators are made is the entire architecture of the simulation is based on right triangles. So those are linearized right triangles. Now, why right triangles? Because right triangle is the one shape that can fill any void space in 2 dimensions. And it can also create a landscape with enough texture that it gives you an illusion of 3-dimensionality.
Oh.
So, by the way, the entire universe is made up of these same right triangles. So then you have to ask yourself the question, are we in a simulation? That's a really good question. But what you're perceiving as being nonlinear is in a way, at the surface of it, it is absolutely nonlinear. There's no straight lines, right? But actually, at the foundational basis of it,
right,
it's a lot of linearity that's making up that nonlinear experience that you're observing.
And there seems to be, this is something that is very fresh for me that I'm observing, but there seems to be a very real literalness, which I'm not sure is a word, but it fits this context of nature. There is a very literalness to it, where if I feel a certain way, I perceive the world that way, which explains the Freudian thoughts that you are a collection of many identities. If you're hungry, you experience the world through a hungry person's eyes. There's a very literalness to nature. So what I'm wondering, and I don't believe in cheat codes. I don't believe in, I like Tim Ferriss with the 4-hour work week things. I don't believe in the get fast, right? You have to engage with nature. It's going to make you work hard to get things and to attain, or to work smart too. I wonder if there is a literal almost setting in which a human can find themselves thinking and postulating in, that feedback cycles and creates a beautiful, magnificent reality before your eyes. You hear Nikola Tesla talk about 369, of course, right? Which blows my mind because how that relates to music is frightening. But he also talked about energy, vibration, and frequency, which seems to be a very literal, non-personalized, egoless, caring energy force in which a human, if they're so lucky enough to kind of stumble upon that ideology, can kind of manifest and create an amazing reality before their eyes, because maybe nature is that literal. Maybe if you are at the right, which sounds very woohoo and not rational, but it actually might be, if you're, vibrating at the right frequency with the energy that you are, you can create a magnificent simulation before your eyes up until your last breath, and then onward after.
So maybe that is what we're living in. What you just described is the foundational principle of all Hermetic belief.
So I love when I arrive somewhere. I love when I show up to the party thinking it's just me, and everyone's like, "Hey, asshole, we've been here."
So what you've just described is the principle of mentalism.
So are those two different things? People have also said Stoicism, right? So there's all these mouth sounds that.
Yeah, I mean, basically that we create the universe around us is probably more appropriately termed a U inverse.
I've heard you say this, right?
So what I mean by that is that how you feel about things, how you observe things. When I say we attract everything we judge, what do I mean by that?
Right.
What I mean by that is it's the old adage of if you're a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. The things that you think is happening to you every day are the things that you probably still have some trauma from either this life or a past life that has yet to be resolved. And you are projecting that out from the inside of you because it's like a splinter inside of your soul that you want to bring out and work out until you have a realization that, oh my gosh, the way I perceived that all along was maybe the exact opposite of what it was.
Right. A duality.
Yeah. So then you go, whoa, wait. So then you can forgive that experience, forgive everyone else in it, and forgive yourself in it. And the world is not a tough place because people hate each other. The world's a tough place because people hate themselves.
Of course.
And what happens is we project all of that self-hatred into the world around us. So the things that we judge in ourselves start showing up in the world around us in all the interactions that we have with everyone else. The things we don't like about ourselves, we're like, I am not that. I am not that. I am not that. I don't want to be that. So I repel against it.
Yeah, very
until I finally realize the thing I'm repelling against is what I am. And I'm not willing to confront, and I'm not willing to own, and I'm not willing to accept. So that then causes this heavy, dense shadow that Carl Jung is talking about.
There we go.
Must be integrated and accepted.
Individuation, right.
Individuation, Aeon, exactly, Aeon. So that's a book that Carl Jung wrote, A-I-O-N.
Oh, I didn't know there was a book.
Individuation. Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Oh, of course.
So this whole notion of being able to start to accept the world around you is only going to occur when you go on an inside journey. But the inward journey into yourself is actually the realization of the outward journey, because you are just a reflection. All of this experience around us. Think of it like this. It's almost like, let's say that there was an iceberg. An iceberg, we could see only what's above the surface of the water, right? And that's the conscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Everything underneath the surface of the water, that is the unseen, the invisible, the unconscious.
And the mass beneath is 90%. Right.
Exactly. The vast majority of it's down there. And by the way, the subconscious mind and the unconscious mind controls all your autonomic bodily functions and everything, right? Think about it. You have trillions of cells right now operating, going through cellular mitosis, all simultaneously. How's that all being directed and guided? We can only, with our conscious mind, do. Some people can do a few things more, but like a maximum of 18 things. We can only walk and chew gum and talk and be on our phone. There's like a maximum number of sort of different activities we can undertake, but that is not true. That limitation is not correct on the unconscious mind. The unconscious mind is operating all the time.
Oh, right.
So my point is this, that as we start to realize, as we go inward, And we realize it's not about blaming everyone else in our lives for what happens to us, but rather, why am I reflecting that circumstance in the world around me? Because I can't separate my observation from the activity that I'm perceiving.
Observation activity.
So, for example, somebody does something, right? I cannot separate the lens of my bias from what that activity was. So let's say somebody comes along and says something a certain way that triggers me because of my past history. It's like, let's say I'm a dog, and every day my owner comes, or my father, or whatever you want to call him, right, comes out, and when he leaves the house every morning, he kicks me on the way out. Right. So I go, oh, like that hurts. Yep. But then after a while, I start to actually believe that that's the way he expresses love to me. Or at least I know he knows I'm relevant.
Right.
So what happens to the dog is the dog starts to believe that it needs to be kicked.
Right.
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 So it actually starts to perceive that kicking is a good thing, because then it knows that it's there. I mean, we've all seen people, that children even, that act out and do bad things, quote unquote, bad things, just to get attention.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So then the dog starts acting out to get attention so that it gets kicked.
Right.
We all do that. And see, the thing is, the truth is, from the very beginning, the notion that being kicked is a good thing or a bad thing became our own conditioning bias. The truth is, it was never a good thing from the beginning. It was never a good thing from the beginning. But all of a sudden, we took it as I need that to know that I'm relevant. I need that experience. Right. So I'm looking now to be kicked. So then people walk throughout their lives trying to get kicked, because they have their own self-loathing also.
Right.
And they feel like they need to be punished. So if you feel like you need to be punished, you're going to put yourself in a world of punishment.
Right.
At a subconscious level. So we are not able to see all of these things. We're the only ones that can't see these aspects in ourselves. You could put two kids in the exact same circumstances, with the exact same genetics and the exact same environmental factors, and they will have very different outcomes. In fact, this is a good example of it. So researchers at Harvard University wanted to understand, what is it that makes some children genius and other children not? Is it nature or nurture? What is it? So they went to a teacher, and they said, okay, we're going to do an observation, study on your classroom, and all your kids are 5 years old and 6 years old. And we're going to test the kids, and we're going to find out which one of them are higher on the sort of rating, or sort of gain higher scores and might actually be genius level, right? And we're gonna tell you, but you're not allowed to tell their parents. You're not allowed to tell anybody.
Great.
So they test 30 students, right? They test 30 kids, and of the 30 kids, 5 kids come back is on this high end of Mensa, towards Mensa. So they come back to the teacher and they say, okay, these are the 5 kids. You're not allowed to treat them differently at all. We're going to observe you in the class. We're going to videotape everything. Right. And you're not allowed to tell anyone this. You're not allowed to act differently. You can't do anything different. Well, what was interesting is at the end of the year, they gave a test to the same students to see which one of the students came out as genius level. And the same 5 students ended up being genius level, which is not a big surprise.
Not at all. Except
that the subject of the research was actually false. They never got any of the students. None of the students, when they were first tested, were genius level. It was a study on the teacher to see if the teacher's expectation would change the outcome for those 5 students. And it did.
Right.
We get in life not what we deserve. We get what we expect.
There it is. That's the non-literal compounding electromagnetic wonder that is this universe. What we expect. The crazy thing, though, about being a human is you have this serotonin system that is millions of years old that teaches you to expect certain things based on what happens in your manifested experience.
That's right. And so that's how conditioning biases change your expectations. When somebody is not intending to be rude to you, you might perceive them as rude.
Taking it personally, right.
And then that creates a cascade of events.
Everything compounds. The 8th wonder of this world, right.
Everything compounds from that point forward. And we don't even realize that we're doing it with literally everything. Everything. Because we think that our truth is the one objective truth.
Oh gosh. Right.
It's a fraction of the truth. Our experience is only a fraction. That's why I really advocate for drawing geometry, because geometry somehow allows you to expand your viewpoints and perspectives. It somehow allows you to put yourself into another perspective so you can look at this angle of geometry in a different way and appreciate it in an entirely different way.
So you're metaphorically applying a shape of something that is geometric to the perhaps many sides of any given truth within a conscious experience.
Yeah, I mean, so for example, right, if I show you this,
right,
if you didn't know that this was three-dimensional, you would say, oh, that's just a hexagon you're holding.
Right.
Same thing, right? But guess what? The compression of a hexagon already has all this information within it. We could recreate this. If I were to put see what shadow is cast on this, I could see a hexagonal shadow. The same could be true also for a cube.
Right.
If I put a cube up against the light and have it cast a shadow down on my desk, it's going to make the shape of a hexagon. So the shape of the hexagon already has within it the compressed information of all the higher dimensional forms that it could become. What we're seeing is only that two-dimensional image. So we don't know that there's more information that's compressed within it, that shadow, that we just simply don't know. The same is true for all things. We all love to say that entropy is random, right? And mathematicians in particular, they love randomness. They're like, oh, my most beautiful equation is e to the I pi plus 1 equals 0. And it's like, why is it so beautiful? It's just beautiful. I'm like, but why? Well, because it's imaginary plane. It's got Euler and pi, and then it comes back to two, transcendental irrational numbers somehow through this weird thing come back to 0. That's like really cool. Okay, well, maybe, just maybe, right? What we are looking at and what we are experiencing is only one aspect, one tiny slither or one tiny facet of a larger truth that we should be seeking to understand. And by breaking down all these experiences that are intended, that we experience over and over again, so that we can dismantle conditioning bias number 1, dismantle conditioning bias number 2, dismantle conditioning bias number 3, that we were not even consciously aware of.
Right.
And
right.
In so doing, we start to expand our perception.
Right.
And in that process, we now start to gain deeper empathy for mankind.
Right.
We gain deeper empathy for ourselves.
Right.
We change our living experience so that instead of being the hammer that perceives the nail all around him, if you're a cop, then everyone's a criminal sometimes.
Right.
If you're a judge, then, if whatever it is, right? Lawyers want to try to gag people.
Yes.
Right, because they think that their power is derived from their ability to speak. So they actually have something called a gag order,
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So think about it. It's like all the things that we are. Doctors think everyone's sick, right? And so what we should try to do.
Wow. Yeah.
Right, and we don't even want to recognize the motivations behind the things we do,
right,
that are actually quite untoward.
That's where you find your task, though. Right. Where you find your fear, you find your task, is what Jung said. And it's so true. And what you're saying, again, that compressed truth verbiage from his mind to the rest of time, again, it's manifesting in a very functional way through what this situation is. You don't want to see the many sides of the geometric shape that is life.
And we don't want to see the aspects of ourselves that we've already judged are not good enough.
Oh,
we don't want to see the motivations and actions, those things that we're doing that are actually just self-serving. And this is why, when you look at ethics inevitably becomes what we believe consciously will benefit us the most. So it's like, that's why the person that's like so obviously self-serving is like pressing for something that they don't even recognize how self-serving it looks.
Yes.
They don't get it. And we're all guilty of it. We're all guilty of it.
Of course.
It's like every motivation we have, it's like, oh, it's really funny how that works. It kind of goes back to Cain and Abel or like two shepherds, with two flocks, and one of them looks over and the grass is greener and says, you know what? He's got nicer, greener grass. That'd be great if I had his land. You know what? I think he worships a different God.
Yes.
And my God's angry because my God doesn't like his God. And so therefore I have to kill him and take his land, and therefore I will consecrate it to my God.
Yes.
That makes me righteous.
Right.
When really the motivation was, I just wanted his fucking land.
Right. Right. So are you therefore saying that it is best to communicate with yourself in a dialogue that is distilled to the original sentiment of whatever it is that you're inspired to do?
Being awakened means you are awakened to your own bullshit.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, of course.
That's it.
Right.
And
so
you are always guiding your life based on your own bullshit. And you don't even realize it until you finally wake up and say, oh my gosh, I've been playing this self-serving game all along, and I don't want to keep playing in this cycle over and over again. So you decide to go the opposite direction.
Okay. And when you say guiding your life, that's the thing that I think about this as of now. And I think of these moments that I had where I felt a rather, specifically with music, in, again, analyzing the cyclical phenomena of many other perceived to be different humans' lives that are kind of just living out their own hero's journey. Right. It's again, a form in which it's orderly, but there's chaos in the individuality. I wonder if is it even you that is telling you to do all these things? And then you start looking at these mathematical underlying explanations of all things. Is it perhaps, are we just following some spectrum of a quantitative order that is fulfilling itself through us?
Many have said the universe is basically just observing itself through us.
Yes, indeed. I believe that's the case with music in a big, big way.
Well, I mean, the word universe is like one verse, right? It's like a song. And what I think of, again, coming back to this whole U-inverse analogy.
Right.
First of all, music and mathematics are just mirror reflections of each other.
You've said geometry is kind of the nexus between music and math. And right.
So if you think about it, you have, in a quaternion analysis or Cartesian plane, you have one real plane of numbers, right? And then you have three imaginary planes because you have negative numbers. And so the square roots of negative numbers are going to be these imaginary plane numbers, right? So the square root of -1 is in the imaginary plane. So this whole idea of imaginary plane. So then if you could take ideas of ratio, and everything is based on ideas and aspects of proportionality of ratio. X and Y, that's all you have. And by the way, all musical chords come as a result of that. I could make all musical chordal relationships by doing different variations and transformations of the numbers 2 and 3.
Yes.
3/2 is the perfect fifth. The cube root of 2 is the major third.
Yep. Yes.
That's 3 and 2. It's just a different way of looking at 3 and 2.
Right. 2/1's an octave. Right.
Exactly. So these very simplistic number relationships are just X and Y axes. There's, again, creating right triangles. But now we're going to then apply that to art, and we've got proportion. We've got golden ratios. We've got, silver ratios and platinum ratios and all kinds of different ratios that we can use to bring more beauty and texture and context to whatever it is we're making. So we're taking that idea that is the real plane, the numbers, into an imaginary plane that becomes art, that then becomes manifest as a holographic projection.
Right. Then the I guess where I'm arriving at it then is depends what you mean by imaginary, because it seems like then at that point what imaginary is something that is yet to be real.
Or maybe it is already real and we're just creating that imaginary reality all around us moment by moment. And all you have to do is bring to that music and resonance, and then it takes on mass, right? Because we already know that sound waves, phonons, carry mass.
Right.
That's already been proven just like about a year and a half ago. Sound waves carry mass.
Sound
And so sound and light are just opposite reflections of the same thing also. Just as mathematics and music are opposite reflections, the right brain interpretation of mathematics becomes a musical interchange with our consciousness. Geometry is the nexus that connects those two things. That's why we fall in love with architecture. We can be looking at something with our eyes that feels like listening to a symphony.
Yes. Yes.
Geometry is just the music that we experience with our eyes. And music is just the geometry, right, that we experience with our ears.
Right, we're these little ego-carrying stoned apes that think that we take everything so personally, but we're unveiling this literal formulaic explanation for all of these things that is so not personally attached to what we love and what we don't love.
No, that's right. And so
freedom in that.
That's why we have to start to realize that it's okay to love the things that we didn't think we should ever love.
Yeah, right. Because you probably do.
Because those experiences give us the texture of life. This is why Jesus taught, and so did Siddhartha, and so did Muhammad, love your enemy.
Yes.
And yet it always comes back. So Jehovah in the Old Testament was always a jealous God. But when Jesus comes, he's like, no, love your enemy. Mm-hmm. Love your enemy as yourself. Mm-hmm. Judge, he only gave 2 commandments, right? Judge not, lest ye be judged, with that same mote in your eye that you're judging in everyone else. Mm. Judge not, because as soon as you stop judging, then you stop judging yourself. That's really what he means by judge not, lest ye be judged. By that same judgment, by yourself. Okay. The other thing he said was love your enemy. Love everyone. Love your neighbor as yourself. As yourself. By loving your neighbor, you end up loving yourself and accepting yourself. And as we accept and love ourselves, the entire world around us transforms into a world that's reflecting that love back to us.
Right. Alan Watts has this concept where he just trusts the universe, right? And of course, if it's surrender, let go or be dragged. If it fits on a Snapple cap, though, there's hours of explanation and life experiences that you could have, years probably, that will, still determine that. And what he talks about is essentially you could take anything that is sentient or a piece of music or anything, and you could analyze it on almost the micro level that is unimaginably small, and you'll find complexity over complexity over complexity. But as you tend to move out and you tend to get more macro, things simplify and harmony is found. Again, no coincidence probably with harmony within major and minor intervals that are happening at all moments in time. The major scale is a collection of yin and yang, major and minor, pull, release. Right. This is just phenomenal stuff that we're touching on here. So, wow. I'm really marveled by all this, because it seems like there is a calculation and this almost old stock ticker that is happening before the times of the fintech revolution we're in now, where you can yield 5% annually with ETFs that you don't ever have to look at. Back in the day, right, you have this machine, the scroll, it's going in and it's going out, and I wonder if there is a mechanistic operational universe or U-inverse that has this approach that you can mentally get into and then therefore get the yields and the gains that you would like.
See, it's funny you say that, because basically one of the things I realized is that when I first started to grok this, I'm like, wait, I'm the master of my fate. I'm the captain of my soul. It comes straight from a poem by William Ernest Henley. Out of the night that covers me. And I could never figure out why this poem had such deep resonance for me.
Right.
Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloodied, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade. And yet, the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. These words had such a huge impact on me, and I could never figure out how all, what was the black as the pit from pole to pole?
Right.
What was, the matter's not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. All these words like really, really stood out to me. This is a poem written in 1875.
Of course, compressed truth.
And I was like, just really drawn to it as a concept. But when I started realizing that the texture and the beauty of life is the fact that I have the contrast.
Ah, right.
And without the contrast, what am I here to experience? So, and I want to learn those things through those realizations. I want to have those experiences. I want to learn how to love my enemy and no longer perceive the enemy at all. I want to learn how to accept myself, because the enemy within is the greatest enemy of all. And when I could start to realize the world in that way, my entire world started to change.
Did it really?
Dramatically.
Wow. What you perceive is what you conceive, almost, is something that we could arrive at with that concept.
And what you conceive is what you achieve.
Oh, and there's 3. And we almost feel that resolve when there's a 3 in the headline, or when there's a 3-step plan, or there's a 3-act play, which I wonder if it's like part of our almost evolved all conscious life form circuitry that we share. Just how we share serotonin with, Jordan Peterson infamously makes it with lobsters, which is an easy metaphor, easy point of entry, but it's true. The 3 thing, I wonder, wow, we just arrived at that. And what you perceive, what you conceive is what you achieve. Absolutely wonderful. So is there something, now this is completely aside from the fact of your studies in regards to all that you do. Are there any best practices that you do constantly to kind of?
Yes, I was going to get to that actually. And one of the things that I realized through all of this is I needed to stop judging everybody else. Because I was super judgmental. I didn't even realize how judgmental I was. I had lived in this world and I'd had a lot of secular tenure, as you said.
Yeah.
And it just means I'm getting old. And basically what that meant was that I had to stop judging people.
Right. Easier said than done.
And as I would stop judging people, then I could move on, right, and evolve and no longer judge myself. And the way I learned to do that was simply by saying, whenever I was about to judge anyone on any topic in a negative way in particular, is I would stop myself and I would say out loud as a punishment to myself in a way. I would say, I am that I am. The thing that I am judging negatively in another person, I would stop and say, I am that thing. Because I know that whatever it is that he or she is doing that's triggering me is not a function of he or she. It is a function of me and my own conditioning bias.
Right.
That I no longer have decided that I want to reject. And now I'm rather going to accept.
Right. And, here in the West, we probably perceive that we have a higher dosage of free will than we do in the actuality of things. Right. But you do have the freedom to stop and say, I want to reject this conditioned bias if you're ever so lucky. Wow. In the present moment to kind of have that awareness. Do you remember what age you were when that started happening?
Oh, probably about 2 years ago.
Oh, what a humble answer. What a humble answer. That's funny. That's very
honest. I mean, look, I've had a great life. I have no complaints. I've had ups and downs, and I now look back on all the aspects of my life with absolute romanticism and love, because I look back on it now, and even for the most difficult of times, I'm super grateful because they all brought me to where I am now. And this is where I'm supposed to be. Maybe we all get hung up on this question of free will or destiny.
You believe in destiny?
In the very beginning, I used to think, I even give a TED talk on this. I would talk about how I could manifest my reality and I could use intentional choice and combine it with things like gratitude and everything. And I could literally manifest whatever it is I wanted to manifest. And I had a really good track record of doing it.
Right.
And what I now realize, though, is that my concept of what is free will and destiny has radically shifted.
Great.
The way I look at things now is that I realized that the past is entangled to the future and the future entangled to the past. And the future determines the past as much as the past determines the future. Those two things are irrevocably tied together. You cannot separate them. It's inextricable. But what I realized that was the biggest aha moment for me was that basically in all circumstances, what I had thought was destiny in the past was really just my own free will, but in the context of the higher self. So what we've been calling destiny maybe is really just the higher self's free will. And we are not separate from the higher self. We are operating as a higher self. We're operating outside of space-time. Therefore, there is no future. There is no past. They're happening. All of this is just an eternal now. So therefore, what we considered destiny all along was still our own free will, because it was the thing that was happening for us. It was the most important thing that we needed in that moment of time to realize ourselves and to evolve to the next level. This is what Alan Watts meant when his, conversation about surrender hit your ears. It's all about realizing that the higher self has your back already. And even when the higher self is throwing you some difficulty and challenge and stuff that you think that you cannot overcome or surmount, it's impossible to get past it. Even that realization in of itself is the thing that you needed the most. You didn't get what you wanted. You got what you needed. The opposite of the song. You can't always get what you want, right?
Right. And why do we sing that? Even if they go to Brazil, they don't speak English natively, even though you speak several languages. They feel it in this archetypal higher self present way, and they're not even aware of those characters that are alive in every ounce of their being. Yet the compressed truth resonates and changes the frequency, and they sing it. Oh, God, I think it's...
Always get what you want, but you always get what you need.
My God. Oh my gosh. So then what happens to the person who then, therefore, such as yourself, wanted to be a musician, but maybe doesn't have... It seemed like you kind of dispatched from that platform concept with ease from the way that you've spoken about it. But the idea that you want to be something and realizing you're not that thing, it can be a kind of a traumatic death for some people.
It was. And I had to put it away. I didn't even tell people that I was a musician. Because it's not what I wanted to identify with anymore. Because I was trying to convince myself that's not what I wanted to identify with anymore.
Right.
So instead of saying I am that, I was doing I am not that. And I built up an entire persona based on what I am not. And what was left over is what I became in my conscious mind.
Right. But the conscious mind is the last thing that manifests.
So that's why you have a midlife crisis. You get a midlife crisis, you have a crisis moment that then you realize all those things that I've been suppressing and repressing by saying I am not that thing comes back with a vengeance.
Oh, Jesus.
Artist. I was no longer an artist. I was no longer a musician. And now here I am at 52 years old and, I sell art.
Yeah, well, right. I sell art, and then here we'll find the mileage of also complexity that goes into the art, right? And all the myelin sheath you're wrapping, while also, learning how to sculpt and do all these other mediums, right?
Yeah, so I never thought I was going to be a sculptor. I never thought I was going to be an artist, a visual artist. I never thought that there would be NFTs made of my artwork.
That's a fascinating one, right?
That's a fascinating one. But so that goes back to your comment, your comment earlier, which is the analog less valuable than the digital? Because I just went to an auction. I bought a painting that had an NFT associated with it of Grace Kelly in Monaco, and it was like 28,000 euros, $28,000, and which is a lot of money for a piece of art. But I was thinking about it. Nobody would have paid that much for that piece of art if it weren't NFT'd.
Of course, because because we have the speculative value that.
And I was in a bidding war with someone else over it.
Oh my gosh!
Some guy I lost a bidding war with on another more expensive painting, also of Grace Kelly, that he ended up getting for $52,000. So I was like, oh, okay, well, at least I got one of them, right? So here we are, right, in this very bizarre world where we're now in a world, and I'm going to have to go in a second, but
Sure.
we're now in a world in the 20th century. The thing that was most venerated in society was being an advisor, transferring, being middlemen, record labels, right? Anyone who could aggregate up community. And the creators, the musicians, the artists, which nobody, everyone wanted to say, I am not that. Most people, right? And me included, right? Then realized, I just wasn't going to make money being that, right? I wasn't going to make money doing it. So I decided, okay, I'll be one of the money changers instead. I'll be, even though I may not love it, I'll find a way to carve my way out, and I can support a family and everything. Because I knew I was good in music and I had scholarships and everything, but I just thought the chances that I'm actually going to be like the next Wynton Marsalis are pretty freaking low.
Low.
Let's be real, right?
Low. Yeah.
Let's be real. Or Chris Bodie or one of these other guys, right? Or Maynard or whatever, because I played trumpet. I played most instruments, actually. But the funny thing is I decided I am not that. I am not that. I am not that. I spent the first half of my life deciding what I am not. And the second half of my life, the later stages of my life now, deciding that I am all those things. All those things I judge negatively. You see, it's a cycle. It's a yin-yang cycle.
It's a yin-yang cycle.
Same thing. I was in the male ascending arc of life, and now I'm in the feminine descending arc of life.
The anima animas.
Exactly. So now you're seeing this realization. So for me, I noticed also that what is valued in society around us is shifting dramatically, isn't it?
Yes.
Today, it's not about being a middleman anymore. We are now moving to paradigms in business that are valuing the creator, the inventor, the innovator.
Oh, yeah.
The middlemen are all going to be cut out. The record labels are all fucked.
Oh, in a certain way, I wonder. I wonder if it gets weird with IP holdings.
You know what? That's all going to get NFT'd as well. I got 3 patents yesterday that just came in. I just posted on them. Right. I just got these 3 new patents.
Got
right?
3, huh?
Yesterday, right? I've got a whole bunch. I've got like close to 50 now.
What are those 3 for?
One of them is for a new calculator that is has a base 12 numbering system on it, because every note in an octave also has a number that's a single digit.
Of course.
Right. So that's kind of obvious when you think about it, but it's not so obvious. It's right here. There's a new calculator. And this one is a let's see here. This one is a waveform energy influence of objects using feedback control system for delivering energy waveform radiation to influence in vivo tissue as described. For the system, the energy waveform radiation is generated by a radiation unit, is directed along a pathway to the tissue, and registration unit is provided to identify a start place relative to the vivo tissue. And basically, this is used to do something called phenotypic expression, which is another patent associated with it. This one is a system and method for using electromagnetic radiation to influence cellular structures. So sound and light, a system for method for present invention requires the use of a generator, a combination of a radiation unit to radiate electromagnetic waveform energy into a target tissue. During radiation of the target tissue, in accordance with a predetermined titration-like protocol, the influence of the waveform energy on the cellular structure is periodically monitored. The protocol is stopped when the cellular structure has been transformed or morphed into a desired phenotype.
No idea.
It's gene editing.
Oh, okay. CRISPR. We're getting into this world.
But not CRISPR in the way CRISPR works. This is playing your DNA like keys on a piano keyboard.
Oh my gosh.
To turn
off
markers, turn off cancer, for example.
Right. Not through dietary choices, but in a literal way. Right.
Just turn it off with sound.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Whoa. Wow. So I think I have one question, and then if this could be the last one, this might be a big one, but I think it encapsulates. I'm going to have to watch back what you just said 3 times in order to. But how do you sit down? How do you organize ideas? Because I bet a lot of ideas come to you, and then how do you systematically see? How do you go from mind to Spotify? That's the thing that I wonder about with a lot of musicians. How did I go from walking in the park to hearing da 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 to, hey, go listen to this on my phone. How do you do that? How do you go? I'm sure you're aware enough to have almost a process.
I would say, first of all, what we think of as thoughts in our brain,
Right.
not really a hard drive. Our brain is a radio receiver. So, and the dial for that radio receiver, the tuning dial, to tune the Hertz frequency,
Right.
is the condition of your heart. It's your emotional state. So the heart is the tuning dial for the radio that your brain then becomes the receiver for. And so whenever we are feeling gratitude and we feel happy and loved, that's when our vibration is raised and we end up tuning into a much higher frequency. And as we tune into that higher frequency of thoughts, the thoughts that come into our mind are literally like radio signals. They're non-local to your brain. They're not stored in your brain. Our brain is not a hard drive storage unit. That's what we think it is, but it's way more than that. Basically, what happens is when we tune into those very high frequencies, the manifestation of those frequencies becomes very easy and the universe converges for your benefit to make those a reality.
So how to stay on that frequency is one thing, right?
And then it turns, so it's remaining on that frequency, not a fear-based frequency,
Right.
but a love-based frequency. It's
Right.
remaining on that frequency, not deviating from it, and also applying your own intention, your conscious choice, your intentional choice to that to amplify it and grow it. I also listen to my intuition. Is this something, when I know that something is going to be big or has big potential and is worthy of my effort and time, I get a chill up my entire back and body.
Right.
And I listen to that.
Of course.
We have far more senses than just our 5 senses. I believe it's 5 squared.
At least. Right. Whoa, 5 squared.
Hmm?
It would only be that given the concept of what we're talking about with duality.
That's because each dimension, each higher dimension we experience will be another exponential power of another whole number of those experiences. So, of course, it's 5 squared. It's the same thing. If you go from the second dimension, which is measuring area in Euclidean plane geometry, to the third dimension, it goes up to the third power, right? So you're looking at volume now. So volume of a sphere is 4/3 pi cubed, pi r cubed, right? Because it's going from the second dimension to the third dimension. The third dimension is now going to be measured in cubic relationships.
Okay.
So it's the third power. So then you go to the fourth power, that's encompassing motion and time. The fifth power is another perspective on motion and time.
Oh.
Backwards.
Backwards. Yin and yang. Black
Yep.
and white, major, minor. Oh no. Oh wow. So this is wild. Wow. We are in this. We are really in this thing.
So then going to the next dimension is just to the sixth power.
And what is backwards from backwards then?
Well, then that's, the next level means that you're no longer bound by time.
Ooh.
Sixth dimension. You're no longer bound by it. You have, backwards and forwards, but you have an x-axis, y-axis, and a z-axis of time then.
A z-axis of time. Okay, that's a lot. That really is a lot.
That's a lot to encompass, but I do have to run now. But
Thank you for the time,
such a
Robert.
pleasure talking with you.
Likewise, my friend. I look forward to
you are one smart dude, I can tell.
Wow.
And as and the people that come into my life, I can tell when I'm making the right choices, when the people that I come into my life are resonating at those higher frequencies.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Because we are everything that we judge. So the more we judge these types of good, excellent, higher dimensional experiences, the more friends we meet, your entire friend network and everything in your life shifts.
Right. I noticed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. I'll talk to you later, my friend.
All the best.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Likewise to you.
Boy, I really do hope that this conversation was as valuable and useful for you, the listener, as it was for me. I want to thank Mr. Robert Edward Grant for his time and his conscious energy and for talking about these ideas that are rather abstract and qualitative in their nature in a way that was very open-minded and very detailed. I sincerely do appreciate that, and I've learned a lot from this. And I hope you, the listener, have taken some things from this, because you're investing your time and your energy in listening to this podcast as well. And I just hope that it brings you value as we roll down this lost highway together. I hope we are learning things and enjoying the sights as we go. I want to thank Osiris Media for hosting the Lost Highway podcast. I want to thank Topo Chico for sponsoring the podcast. And most importantly, I want to thank you, the listener, for listening to this podcast. Without you listening, this would be a whole lot less fun. And as Jerry Garcia said, I've opted for fun in this lifetime. Y'all keep it patient, persistent, and positive. Keep it cosmic, and I will see you next time.
Osiris.